If you own a multi-tool or you're thinking about adding one to your toolbox, you're gonna wanna see this video. You know the dreaded smoke. In this video, we're gonna show you how to build a simple DIY tool to sharpen your blades on demand. This is gonna save you a ton of stress and time because you're not even gonna think about using a dull blade ever again. Aside from hitting something really hard that would instantaneously dull the blade, probably the greatest enemy of any sharp blade is heat. And these multi-tool blades are prone to getting really hot. If you think about how the blade works, the oscillating motion, it doesn't really have a great means of clearing the debris from the cut. And so the effect is the debris tends to kind of stay around the blade, and because the tool is moving at thousands of RPM, it tends to build a lot of heat, and because of that, even if you're gentle and you're trying to take care of your blades, you're going to end up dulling blades very quickly. The other challenge, of course, is that the total blade surface is very small. A lot of times these blades are only about an inch wide. And if you think about it, we're trying to make oftentimes very long cuts with this. And so if you compound the heat with the just total surface area of the blade, resharpening is really important. To help combat some of those issues that we have with normal blades, you could move up to a carbide blade. Of course, carbide blades are much more expensive. The multi-tool by nature is kind of already an unstable and unpredictable tool. It doesn't have self-truing mechanisms, kind of like a table saw or a miter saw might. The tool just kind of has a vibrating nature to it. And so there's not a lot we can do to make cuts straight and true by enhancing the tool. It is what it is. But what we can do is keep our blades clean and sharp, and that will make cutting so much easier. Before we take a look at this DIY tool, let's take a quick look at some of the other ways that you could be sharpening your multi-tool blades. All right, we've got ourselves a properly dull blade. That's not gonna cut anything. So probably one of the clunkiest methods that I can think of to sharpen a blade like this would be to use a classic hacksaw. If you have one in your toolbox, sometimes it's the best option that you have. And what we could do is we could try to just reestablish the gullet in these teeth one by one. All right, that's a waste of time. Okay, you're gonna have to be pretty stinking desperate to try the hacksaw method, especially if you don't have an established gullet that you can work from. This is gonna be painful, but hey, if you're far away and that's the last blade you have on the job site, maybe this would work. All right, so what's the second option? Well, it's probably gonna be something like a rotary tool. These are super handy, and maybe you have one in your toolkit already. Maybe you have one on the job site. And so this probably would get us a fairly sharp blade fairly quickly. For the rotary tool, we're gonna use a cutoff wheel, and these are an 040 thickness, so they're very close to the gullet on the original blade. That's actually working pretty good. That's starting to look decent. That's not too shabby. So here's a side-by-side comparison with a brand new blade over here. And this is the one that we sharpened with the rotary tool. It's not perfect, but if you were in a pinch or if you just want to get more mileage out of your blades, I'm pretty sure this one's gonna cut pretty dang good. So let's give it a try. Well, if I had to rate that cut, I would say that was actually fairly easy. There was a little bit of smoking probably. I probably was pushing a little bit more on the blade than I probably should have been. I almost think if we took that rotary tool and we came in at a slight angle on each one of these teeth, it might make the tips ever so slightly more pointy. But to be honest, this cut really well. The total time to sharpen here was probably less than 30 seconds. So if you're using this method with the rotary tool, I think you're gonna have really great success. Let's do one more torture test with a nail and see how well this resharp job cuts a nail. Well, I would call that test pretty much a fail. I mean, you'll probably get through that nail eventually, but it's definitely not cutting efficiently. Let's contrast that with a brand new blade that is designed to cut metal, and let's compare. that was really simple. So these wood blades, when resharpened, probably are not going to be able to cut through metal. And I think the problem actually is the softness of the blade, not so much the sharpening. So what we should probably do is to try to resharpen a harder blade and see if the resharp job on one of those will cut metal. So this blade is actually labeled for wood and metal, where this blade is only labeled for wood. All right, this blade is properly dull. Let's give it a sharpen. Let's do a quick metal test. Wow, really? Awesome. Let's do that one more time. I just want to confirm that this blade is in fact really easily cutting through this metal. Well, that definitely confirms that the rotary tool is an amazing way to resharpen these blades. Of course, for wood, it's a no-brainer. For the metal, we definitely lost a little bit of the cutting power, and that might just be my poor sharpening job. If you did a little bit more detail, you might be able to get better efficiency, but this definitely works. But it's a little bit slow, and you can tell that my sharpening is kind of uneven. I've got an even better tool that will speed this process up and give you an even better sharpening. This is the rotary tool, but on steroids. This tool will allow you to sharpen a blade in a single pass, and because the discs are evenly spaced, it should have a very even sharpening to it. This is designed to be the width of the blade, and it's designed to simply attach to your drill. I've seen advertised a couple of ideas that are very similar to this. The one uses a diamond carbide blade, and it's designed to sharpen a lot of different things, but their primary marketing is towards multi-tool blades. The problem is this machine is upwards of $250. So unless you're running a crew of people, maybe finishers or something like that are going through blades on a daily basis, I can't see how the average DIY person has any business owning a $250 sharpener. I've also seen another company advertising a product very similar to this in the $50 range. And now that's starting to make some sense. But what's crazy to me is I built this tool for $5. So the premise of this tool is to use a very budget-friendly cutoff wheel. This is a 3" by 1/32 cutoff wheel with a 3/8 inch arbor. Using this simple disc, we can build a tool that does what the rotary tool did, but it does it all at one time, and the cuts are evenly spaced. Staying with the 1/32 thickness, I went to my local hardware store and I picked up some 3/8 inch fender washers, and you'll see that they're the same thickness as the disc. If we place these washers between discs on an arbor or a shaft, we're going to get very consistent cuts. This box of discs is 25 discs, and I paid just $10 for it. You only need 12 discs to make your own sharpening tool. So while at the hardware store, I picked up this socket head cap screw, which is a 3/8 inch arbor or 3/8 inch shaft. It is 3 inches long, and I also picked up one nylon lock nut. I picked up a couple of 3/8 inch rubber washers just to take out some of the vibration. Because these discs are consumable and we're making an even cut, in theory they should wear evenly each time. If they wear out, we can simply pull this back apart, put on new discs, and we can keep sharpening. Because it fits in the palm of your hand, it should fit easily in any toolbox or a tool chest or a pack, but there's no reason to be working with a dull blade. Okay, let's start out with the wood and metal blade. So I've just chucked this up in the drill here. Wow, that was fast. Wow, check that out. Boy, it almost looks like you could go a little bit more between the discs. It feels like the teeth are kind of thin. This would be fine for wood, but I'm a little bit concerned about metal. So the total time to sharpen that was probably less than 10 seconds. That is very sharp. I almost think that cuts better than it did when it was new. Oof, that was quick. If that was like the bottom of a door jamb or a piece of trim or something, I mean, it wouldn't even be that dense for a blade that was resharpened in about 10 seconds. So of course, with this method, the tooth profile is going to be drastically different than it was when it was new. And I don't have a bright idea on how to get any kind of a angled profile on this blade, but you can't argue that it doesn't cut amazing. So as long as the tooth profile is cutting great, who cares? And in the interest of fairness, let's go ahead and do the nail test. Uh-oh, looks like we have a failed test, and once you see the blade, you'll understand why. So it looks like when it comes to metal, those little teeth profiles I mentioned earlier are not gonna survive. I'm gonna make a quick, small adjustment to the tool and increase the spacing here between the discs. And this will be the new tooth profile for the blade. Let's test it out. Well, that was definitely quite a bit harder than I was hoping for. So interestingly, widening the tooth profile does not seem to help on this specific blade. So at this point, I would say that this resharpening method is kind of suspect for metal, but it's a no-brainer for wood. So a really good next question would be, can we sharpen a carbide blade with this method? I can tell you right away, I'm not even making a dent in the carbide tip. So these discs are definitely not strong enough to sharpen carbide. So there it is, a DIY multi-tool blade sharpener for $5. One time saver would be to just get all of your blades together, all of your dull blades, and clamp them in a vise or something like that, and you could just sharpen all of them at one time, which would make this process even faster. I felt like this spun very true in the drill. I don't feel like there's any changes necessary. It definitely worked good on the high speed setting. And once you start to create the gullet, I feel like the discs just guide themselves in. You can kind of choose your depth, maybe play with something like this and see if you can find a perfection on sharpening. What do you think of this tool? Do you think this is something that would be beneficial in your toolbox? Would it save you time, or what are you doing? Are you basically throwing your blades in the trash and buying new ones? Or do you have some other means of sharpening that you're using? Maybe let me know in the comments below and we'll all learn from that. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see other tool videos on the channel, we'll leave a playlist right here, and we'll see you on the next one.